Friends, we are so
Yay.
excited about our guest today and are welcoming Allison Hare to the Friendzy. Allison is the host of the Culture Changers podcast, where she says, screw the status quo. She talks with trailblazing pioneers who are flipping convention upside down and changing the way we live. Allison has a career path rooted in professional sales, technology, entrepreneurship, public speaking, and writing. She is also a mom of two and recently became a dance and strength instructor. How amazing is that? So, Allison Hare, welcome to the Friendzy.
Hey, what a great introduction. Thank you all. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to you both.
You earned it. Was any of that a surprise to you? Like, I'm just kidding.
I didn't make up any of it. I
earned it.
Exactly, you did.
So I'm so excited to learn about the Culture Changers podcast and the things that you've learned with all of your fascinating guests that you've had. But I guess I want to start with the seed of it. Why did you get it started? Where did that come from?
So much. So I know that your podcast really focuses on, I think it's women, right? Like women after 40.
Yep.
And when I turned 40, I had my first son when I was 38, and I had a daughter through IVF at 40. And like right when 40 happened, everything went bananas. And, like I started to notice some things where I was volunteering at a local elementary school that was for underprivileged kids. And I started to work with these kids where I'm like, oh my God, there's so much that if my friends knew, or if people knew what life was really like for these kids, instead of writing them off as bad kids, I don't want my kids around them, you know, it, it would be so different, like the systemic issues that were going on there. And then there was so much political unrest and so many experiences that I had gone through the birth of my kids that could have been prevented if healthcare was done in a more patient-friendly way or mother-friendly way. And so there was like this perfect storm of things that were going on where I thought, I need to make a difference, and like voting once every 2 years didn't seem like it was impactful enough. And so I got a promotional email from Seth Godin. Like Seth Godin is this amazing thought leader that has this daily email that he's had for over a decade. And it was, like, hey, if you want to start a podcast. And I didn't even look at what it cost. I was like, yeah, let's do it. I have a degree in broadcasting, that I've never really used. And so I just did it. I had no idea what I was going to say or what topic would be interesting or if it would work. And it just took hold where, like the culture changers thing. I think we don't realize how powerful we are until we open our mouths, until we share how we're really feeling, until we connect with others and realize that maybe some of the old conventional ways no longer serve us. And there are new, fresh ways, and people that, with the advent of the internet are doing unbelievable work, and they're doing it in their own communities. They're doing it on a massive scale or a small scale, but all of those scales impact the world in a greater way. And that's how Culture Changers was born. I just think things can be done. I wanted to be a force for good, and I wanted to be able to scale. And that was how I started.
Well, and I think that you
Awesome.
touched upon, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, but I think that there's you touched upon the fact that it seems that after 40, there need to be meaning to what you did. We talk about that a lot. One of the reasons Jen and I encourage women to share their stories is because, your story, which I want to talk about the health issue, is so unique. And so when you put yourself out there and you bring meaning to what you do, you can change the world. You can change culture. All three of us here on the show have had experience with a fertility clinic for one reason or another. Like you just mentioned. So if you don't mind, my follow-up question is digging deeper into what you said about things being more mom friendly. What did you mean by that?
So with my son, when I was 38, when he was being born, I had too much amniotic fluid. And so my OBGYN had recommended I get induced early. And so it was like 38 weeks. And, I was excited. And long story short, I got pressured into a C-section. And while so many people have C-sections, it's very, very, very commonplace. What I realized afterwards is that, he was born early and went into the NICU for 9 days. I never got to latch with him, so I exclusively pumped for 9.5 months. And I didn't get to hold him right away. I didn't get to hold him for 2 days. I didn't even know where he went. Like they just took him away. I thought they were cleaning him, and I was like in the back, after the C-section, after really truly being pressured into it, but I had no idea, what the right answer was. And it was just awful. And so when I got pregnant with my second, I, asked, can I have a VBAC? Can I have a vaginal birth after cesarean? And 4 doctors told me, hell no, you cannot. Can I say hell on the show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've said worse.
Great. I'm originally from New Jersey, so I'll try not to let any F-bombs fly. But so with the second one, I had gone to all these doctors and I didn't necessarily want a vaginal birth. I just wanted a different birth. I wanted to feel like I had power or had control. And I, went to this one doctor that looked at all my records. I was much higher risk. I was 40. I had a C-section. I had something called a myomectomy, which was fibroids in my uterus. So I had additional cuts in between then where, like the risk of uterine rupture was much higher. And so he looked at it and he's like, I'm looking at your records. Your body can stand the trial of labor if you want to. And I said, well, do I need to have a C-section? And he's like, do you want one? And I was like, what kind of doctor are you? Do I need one? Yes or no? And he's like, you have options. We believe in shared decision making here. And, if you want to have a family-centered cesarean, we will honor that. If you want to get an epidural, no problem. If you change your mind, you want to try natural, you change your mind, we will honor that. But we're going to monitor you closely. And if anything, if I say at any point that you need a C-section, you need one. Until then, it's your choice. And through this process, I was so scared. I was just so scared. And, like I was training my body, I was working out, I was mentally trying to prepare. Like, am I gonna, am I being reckless? Because I'm trying to trust these doctors, and all these other doctors told me no. And ended up having the most beautiful med-free vaginal birth that was so healing and so beautiful. And it was almost like a big FU to my first doctor. Like it just was, where I was like, when I started to do research, I realized that, 30 years ago, only 10% of births were C-section. Now it's like 33% and even higher in Georgia. And so I started to learn that it was more on the convenience of the doctors, that if there's any elevated risk, it's much easier, it's much more predictable, it's easier for the doctor, but harder on the parents. So I'm not anti C-section. I am pro-choice. I'm pro-mom having really having the facts and not being kind of pressured or scared into it. And I had the exact same conditions with my daughter than I did with my son. So the too much amniotic fluid, I had all of that and was older and had more risk, but I was able to do it. So while my situation may be unique to me, I don't know, but I got the sense and started to realize from a healthcare perspective and from fertility that moms really need help. Moms really need help with the identity. They need help postpartum. They need to feel like they're not so alone. They need to feel like that they're not, failing because that everyone else on Instagram and their friends seem to just be so unfettered and look beautiful, and their bodies pop right back, and they just have it all handled. And I just think that there's so much more that needs to be done there.
And I would say before even getting pregnant, because I had similar experiences as you with C-sections and being encouraged to have them. Now, my first was because she was breech
Mm.
and wouldn't turn. So we went through a lot of those different options. But the second was going to be a VBAC, but then I was late. So everybody has a different experience. But what
Sure.
I'm saying is, I very much connected to what you were saying about that, and that you come into the situation unknowing all you want is to have a healthy child. That's all you want, is for the process to be healthy. And so you're willing to be directed by others very easily. So I almost feel like that education piece, that empowerment piece for mothers needs to come before you're ever pregnant.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Because once you're pregnant, it's like the worry kicks in. I feel like the education should come before that. And the support should come before that.
Well, and I think that, it's the communication with the medical professionals, and like you said, in incorporating the mothers into this. Just briefly, in my experience, I did not carry my son because I'm a kidney transplant recipient and I was 44. However, we used a surrogate, and I'm in a part of he has another mother, so a lesbian couple at the hospital, because the surrogate was giving birth. They were only going to allow one of us into the room because that was their standard. The mother
Mm.
gives birth and the father is in the room. And so we argued with so the day that we were giving birth to our son, we all were arguing with the hospital, you have to let both of us in. And they kept saying it's protocol, it's for safety. And even the
Mhm.
surrogate was losing it, saying, how in the world can you not allow both of these mothers in there? Finally, the hospital gave in and only allowed one mother in until the actual birth was happening, and then the other could be swooped in, because for them, I guess that's what they thought was a good compromise. But still, it was a good 2 or 3 hours of arguing before his
Wow.
birth for us to be able to be in the room. So again, it's one of those things where you understand from the medical community their perspective, their scientific perspective on all this. But at the same time, you have to incorporate the family and the I don't know, the levity of this situation. This is their child being brought into the world, and like you said, there should be a choice for a variety of families and in a variety of physical conditions on how that takes place.
The human
Agreed.
side of it.
Yes.
Yes. It's like they forget the human side of it.
Right.
So how does Culture Changers address that?
So I actually I have a whole multitude of people on my podcast that are, thought leaders. They might be political figures. They might be medical practitioners. I happen to have my OBG, the one that was so healing and wonderful. I had him on my podcast to kind of educate on when you are pregnant, what are your options? What are your choices? And how does it differ from what we're told in society? What choices do you actually have? So, part of it, like my hope when people listen to my podcast, that people are going to think, wow, I didn't even realize that that was an option. It just kind of changes the perspective. And now I'm doing something where I'm doing mini series. And so I'm in a mini series now, which I'm so into, and it is about belonging. And especially as a woman in your 40s, of making friends and what friendship looks like, or even cults, like people who want to belong somewhere, and not that they are, lemmings or uh, weak or vulnerable, but end up in these, either cult like followings or cults. It's just been so exciting. Social identities, like you, Melissa, when you are a mother, a lesbian wife, all of those things, or a podcast host, a TV personality, a writer, all of those things have a code of conduct that informs your decisions of how do you move through the world. And so whether it is your political affiliation or any of those things. So I had an expert on social identities. He is a professor from NYU, talking specifically about social identities, but also how do we, like, from the political perspective, it's really hard for us to communicate and connect and belong with each other like we normally were because of the division that has happened. So how do you unpack that? So it's just been really interesting. So I'm trying to, like take some of these monster problems, the ones that really hit us personally, and figure out how do we find a way out and how do we add our voice to the conversation where we can be an agent of change.
Allison,
Awesome.
I think that everything you just said is compounded with the pandemic. Here we are
Mhm.
isolated in our homes, and then some that are still being very conservative about being in their homes and not being back in the office or back in the restaurants or back
Mhm.
in the cultural activities. So, from what you have gathered in your mini series, I mean, what is some of the lessons that you've learned about how we can move forward as older women coming out of this pandemic, and how we can feel like we belong to each other and belong to the world, even to nature? Because there's a part of me that started
Mm.
doing more
Mhm.
nature walks and these kind of, because I realize that so much of my isolation has been in the house rather than being outside and being, kind of the core of where I came from.
Melissa, you're so right about the nature thing that you've seen RV sales have gone up and
Mhm.
people looking to backpack or just kind of go throughout the nation or go throughout the world where people are kind of waking up to nature being part of it. I think through this belonging series, the part that's been frustrating is that the answer is belonging to yourself and feeling like you don't need external validation and don't need to
Mhm.
have this many friends or this type of friendship. And I think that and I know me personally, I'm really trying to heal, and trying to feel whole on my own, that I do look at external validation, and it drives a lot. It drives a lot. I'm very if you guys are into Enneagram, I'm like a 3. So I'm all about productivity. I'm a 3-wing 4, I'm all about productivity and getting stuff done. And that is a very overused muscle, a very masculine type of energy, where I'm trying to balance to be okay to be quiet, be okay to be by myself, and feel whole without feeling like I had to have belong all of these other places. So I think that is what the answer is, really, is to feel whole on your own. And it's always a journey, right? I mean, it's not, unless you're the Dalai Lama, who probably has his own challenges, it's an ever never ending journey.
Mhm.
So true. So I saw recently you had a friendship coach
Yes.
on a recent
Oh
episode
my
of your
God.
belonging series. So
Yes.
I did not even know a friendship coach
Me
existed.
neither.
What is that?
This girl was awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. She is a certified friendship coach. And I had heard about it a few months ago, and just I've been after her for months. And she finally said yes as I was kind of going into this belonging series. And it turns out that she has a background in like PR and marketing, and started to see, she was teaching in a high school, and started to see how much people were struggling in a high school with their friendships. And she started to really, really dive into all the books and studies and got certified in this and started to help people. And so she told her family she was going to become a friendship coach. People laughed at her. They said, "You do what? How do you make money at that?" And she started doing these TikTok videos or reels. And I think one of them went viral. And all of a sudden, she blew up and started to offer coaching programs and has this amazing podcast. But it was very interesting where I had her on my show. And what I thought was fascinating is that 40% of people say they do not have a best friend. 40% of people, and that 98% of people feel lonely even though they have friends. So I think to your point, Melissa, about the pandemic is so right, that people do feel lonely. They do feel, like as you emerge, I guess, back into the world now that people are vaccinated and things are opening up. Um, how do you emerge? Hopefully better, more wise, like kind of reevaluating, reassessing, what is important to you, and do your friends, are they the same? or do they
Mhm.
change? So it was just fascinating to learn that. She said that every 7 years, you will turn over half of your friends. And which I guess kind of makes sense with stages and phases in your life. But so much of it was all I would say all of it was really interesting that, she talked about not, when you see like the show Friends and people that would always be available every night to hang out at the the perk shop,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
They never had other plans. Nobody was running late, like they just were always available to hang. And I think the media has kind of painted this, romantic thing of best friends. But she said that any friendship worth having, you have to go through the troubled spots too. And so many people don't know how to confront people that, and maybe set their own boundaries or even like letting go of friends that have drama. This is just fascinating.
Well, as you spoke, it makes me think of two things. One, we all have children, and you see the children
Yeah.
at a certain age that they're friends with everybody. You just put them on a playground together, they'll figure it out. And then
Yeah.
as adults, we have a harder time to do that. But then I also remember my mother telling me because she uh, observed the fact that once her husband died, when my father died, that there were friends that left. And it
Mm.
wasn't, it's because that the dynamic was that she made friend they as a couple made friends with other couples. And then when that coupling changed, it was awkward for everybody and nobody kind of knew what to do. So she wasn't as included. And so she was talking about how also in her culture, she gave up her friends to follow her husband. And so then she made friends with her husband. And anyway, as she got older, it was harder for her because all that dynamic was done. Her high school friends had all sparsed out, and then, her couple friends had all sparsed out. And to your point, we usually are friends with our environment. So work
Mhm.
dictates our friends. So when you talk
Mhm.
about how you transfer your friends every 7 years, to me, that correlates probably with a lot of people changing jobs, right?
Yeah.
Because you're there all day, so you end up making friendships with, your coworkers. And in the pandemic, so much of us has been working from home that
Mhm.
you don't have any friends, right? And so, yeah, moving forward, I could see where a friendship coach like Jen, I didn't know that even existed, but I could see a
Isn't that
space for
cool?
it to
I
be
was
like you were when
Yeah.
you're
But I
5.
was bowled over too because I posted something on social media on the stories and asked like, "What are you struggling with?" And was bowled over with how many people were saying this. It felt so urgent, and it felt so private, both men and women. And I'd be interested to learn about both of you guys. Knowing what you know about friendship, but raising small children with friendship. How do you help guide them as they kind of navigate their own friendships through your own lens? I just think it's like your own sociology experiment in your family. I'd
It's
love to
true.
know.
It's true. Well, I think like Melissa said, it is so heartwarming to see kids because anybody they spend time with for a little while becomes their friend. Um, and I think that mine are young enough now that they still have that. My oldest
Mhm.
is a third grader, and I think she's on the precipice of the clickiness of girls. So
Right.
we're not there yet. And we've just talked about really making sure that you make people feel good and that you make people feel included no matter what it is that you're doing. So that's the major conversations. I will tell you one side story is that my children have cousins who don't speak English, and we went to visit them this year in Switzerland. They are all French speaking little kids. Okay, there's three of them in one family,
How
one
cool is
cousin on the
that?
other side,
Right.
and it doesn't matter to kids. My kids speak
Wow.
Mm.
English and no French. Their kids speak French and no English, but they played together for a week and had a
Mm.
blast and really got to know each other and started to learn the other language and really got along. So it showed me that it's really at what your heart center is and where your energy and your joy is that helps you connect to other people. It's not even language.
Mm.
Oh,
So
that's a
that was a
great
sidebar. But
story.
Melissa, what do you think with encouraging Mr. Carter to
How
be
old is Mr.
friends?
Carter now?
He is 7.
Oh my
I can't believe
goodness.
he's 7. My joy. And, for him, he is very observant, and he's a rule follower, which means that he will be the tattletale. Like, he's the one that has to. I see him be a dictator, right? To like making sure everybody follows the rules. And so it's one of those things where I don't want to come in and give him too much feedback because he's got to figure this out on his own. But I can see where that's a struggle, because as he gets older, kids are going to be like, why can't we just relax and not have these hard set rules? But currently he like it, I mean, he's just friends with everybody. He already knows who he's gonna marry, so he understands the levels of friendship where
So
he is
cute.
his core girl. But yeah, I think that what's interesting is I can already see as an adult the personalities of him and his classmates, and to Jen's point, I can see what that might look like as teenagers
Yeah.
already, because I have that experience, right? And I can see, oh, well, this isn't gonna work, they're not gonna work, and they're gonna be tied or whatever, and of course, that's from my perspective, it may not turn out that way, but it is interesting how hormones change everything, and sexuality changes so much.
Mm.
And to the point of my mother earlier, a lot of the women in those groups did not want her to be a part of the groups because their husbands would pay attention to her because she was the widow that needed to be taken care of. So her friends were jealous of the attention their husbands were giving her. And we're talking about 70s and 80s year old. It doesn't
It
matter how
never
old you are,
ends.
it never is.
Right.
But I was always fascinated in my life how much sexuality dictates our relationships with people. And in that case, it is women being friends with other women, and those dynamics. So yes, to me, hormones and
Mm.
sexuality is the difference is the difference between us now and when we were in elementary school.
Now,
You know,
Allison, how old are your kids?
they're 8 and 6. And I
Okay.
I have a sidebar story, and I wonder
Yeah.
if you can answer a question for me on this. So a couple years ago, I took my kids to get family photographs. So we're like running around in a field or whatever. And so the photographer had a son exactly my son's age. They had never met before. And towards the tail end of the photo shoot, her son was coming in. And my son saw her kid, and they immediately noticed each other and ran to each other and started playing immediately, never met. And I remember the photographer saying, "Why can't we be like that as adults?" And that has kind of carried me. And I
Yeah.
wonder, how would you answer that question? At what point does that go away, when people are no longer safe?
I think it's about being less open, right? We all get hurt along the way. We become a little
Mhm.
bit more protective of our hearts. I think that's probably why, to me, is
No,
that
yeah.
with experience, you get burned. And so you're not quite as wide open, and you
Yeah.
don't want to get judged either, because if somebody walked into my office building and I went running towards them, they would think I was totally a Looney Tune.
True.
Yeah. No, I agree with Jen. I think at some point we went from not being afraid to being afraid of the world. So I think
Mm.
that, Jen and I have
Yes.
recently had this conversation where, children coming into the world, um, they're not prejudiced, they're not angry, they're not
Mhm.
like, it doesn't matter what somebody looks like, you wanna spend time with them. We teach children about difference. They don't come into the world looking at difference, they come into the world looking at opportunity. And so at some point, we felt the need to take that protection of children a step further. So, like, racist parents will say a child of a different color is unsafe. So don't hang out with them.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned earlier about special needs kids, whether it's, behavioral or educational or whatever difference where they may not be on the same scale as other kids. Well, they're probably not a good influence. Yeah, you shouldn't be. It somehow we teach our children safety, and especially with girls, you can't go out by yourself. You can't dress
Mhm.
that way. You can't. All of a sudden, we get inundated with how we are a target for the world, and I think that we do our girls a tremendous disservice by that, thinking we're protecting them, and all we're doing is giving them a life in which they have a hard time navigating through it until they usually reach, our age after they're the age of 40 and they
Mhm.
start unwrapping all that. But Yeah, I think it's fear. Somehow we become fear-based. And I think it's a shame.
I had somebody on my podcast. Her name is Cindy Robinson. And as part of the Belonging series, I asked her, where does this begin in childhood? And her answer knocked me on my butt. And she said, it happens the moment parents say, no, you're wrong. Meaning if, Uncle Jimmy comes in and you tell your child, go hug Uncle Jimmy. I don't want to. Go hug Uncle Jimmy. No, I don't want to. Go hug him. You don't want to offend him.
Right.
And that it's like their own little intuition that every time you redirect from their intuition, that maybe they maybe they're afraid of that person. Maybe he's a creep. Maybe he's fine. He just, like they're not comfortable with older people. Who knows? And I thought that was really interesting. So I'm starting to kind of look at a different lens of how can you allow your child enough autonomy to make their own decisions. But the moment you keep redirecting and telling them, no, your intuition is wrong, is when that belonging starts to break. Isn't that wild?
Wow.
Well, that
That's
makes sense
powerful.
because there's a disconnection there with your parents, right?
Yeah.
I think the moment that you don't feel seen by your parents is very impacting on a child, even if the parent doesn't realize that's what they're doing, right? And that sounds like what that is, where you don't see your child for what the child is trying to tell you. And, and then the child, I don't know, yeah, absolutely. Because I'm sure in my life, I was the youngest by far, and I was the oops baby, and I was, kind of discarded a lot because my parents were so overwhelmed by their teenagers. And I definitely have had to deal with the idea that there was a perception in me that I was not seen. So I didn't belong in this family. And I'm still to this day, now my parents are gone and all that's left are me and my siblings. And it's a hard process for me because it's like, well, I don't feel as connected as I should. I don't feel as they don't feel like a tribe to me, and they should, and so yeah, it's what I feel and then what I should feel, right? That I'm still dealing with.
Y'all, we went deep.
For sure. Okay, so Allison, I want to talk about age because here on the
Yes.
Friendzy, we say, stop lying about your age all the time. How is your age an asset for you?
Oh, I've never been asked that question and have never thought about it. So let me see if I can answer it on the fly. I just turned 47. And I remember knocking on the door at 40, kicking and screaming and so upset. And I think at that time I was also doing IVF and was trying to have my second. And once I got pregnant, I started to calm down with it. It's something I struggle with, and it's something I struggle with because I do have the Botox, I do have the fillers, I get my hair colored every 4 weeks, I have lash extensions. I mean, if people say, "Oh, so and so, whatever looks good," I was like, at this age, if it looks good on me, it's probably fake. And so, while while
I love that
don't
you talk about that. Honestly, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've had work, all that stuff. And I would love for it not to matter, but it does. It does to me. And that doesn't mean I judge other people for, whatever they choose to do. And, to some extent I enjoy, like getting pampered and kind of doing all those things, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of maintenance. It's a lot of money that I wish I could I wish my energy was placed elsewhere, but it is what it is. And I am fighting it every step of the way. I think from a body perspective, I mean, I became a dance instructor after never dancing before during the pandemic at 46. So I
I love that.
I do too. I feel great and I feel awesome. So I don't wake up with aches and pains and creaks, like I really do take good care of my internal body as best I can, other than some dark chocolate and fruit by the foot, which have been my pandemic diet. But I don't know.
You said dark chocolate. Now, Allison, I mean, that's
It's
conscientious chocolate
antioxidants.
eating. Yes, exactly.
So I can be as vain as I can be deep. You know what I mean? But it's there, and it's something that I wish I could maybe appropriate my energy elsewhere, but it is. So it is something that I openly struggle with. I don't know. What
To me,
about you
it's
guys?
probably for I see you as short time as we've met is that I think your age allows you to go deep quickly and gives you the confidence to ask those curious questions, right? It's that wisdom that has come with time, I think, that allows us to be as curious as you are.
I do think that I don't struggle as much with asking questions. And I've always been a chief question asker. I've always been very curious, but I would agree with that. But I also think, this year especially, I lost my mother earlier this year. And I feel like, and I know, Melissa, you've lost your parents. Jen, I don't think you have. I think you still have your parents.
I'm
Yeah.
lucky. Yep, they're still here.
Yeah. And so I don't know if this is unique to me, or Melissa, you might relate, but I feel like after losing my mom, and my mom's death was beautiful. It was as good as you could possibly imagine for a death. Um, which I'm grateful for, but I feel like there are layers being shed that I didn't even know I had. And so I feel a lot more raw and emotional, from like, so I can get deep, but also I feel like, um and part of the impetus for the belonging series is because I realized through my own son, who is a highly sensitive person, he's a highly sensitive kid, and I started to realize how he would get really hurt when he would be, excluded from this group, or he might get picked on, but he would just be destroyed. And when I started to see him that way, I realized I'm like that. I just have hid it for so many decades, for
Yeah.
as long as I can remember. I felt so rejected. So I have like, I'm an extrovert, and most of my close friends are introverts. So I get hurt all the time. They're like, no, we're not going to hang out. And I just would never say, I would just kind of intellectualize it, and kind of left brain it. And of course it's not me, but it just would kind of hit and ding. And so it feels more raw to me. It feels more, and that's kind of how this whole series began, because I realized how hurt I am all the time, but would always just plow right
Mhm.
over. I just would never acknowledge it. I didn't even notice it enough, because I would just kind of put my social constructs, my social identities of, you know, being the cool girl, and just everything is fine. And I don't want to cause drama, and I know it's not directed at me. It just hurt. And so that's that's kind of where it comes from.
Well, I love the vulnerability. It's like Jen said, you're able to
Mhm.
do it without being ashamed of it, to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And also, congratulations on being aware of your child, because highly sensitive people need people who understand them, or at
Mm,
least have empathy for them. Because
it's a
again,
gift. It's a
you can
gift that
you
he's that way.
yeah, you can do far more damage by ignoring the fact that he's especially as a boy. In this day and time, hopefully that won't matter in the future. But also, I mean, with the loss of my mother, and I've said this on the show before, that I had the hard realization that I had to become my own mother.
Mm,
And that's been the hardest thing. I lost my mother over a year ago, a year and a half ago, but still, I mean, there's not a day that goes by that there's not this, I don't know, it's raw. It's just a very raw, right to the core moment that I have learned to embrace. But those are the moments where I wish I could call my mom. I wish I could ask my mom for advice.
mhm,
And so I have to ask myself for advice. I have to, I have to be my own mother, because that safety net has been taken away. But that's part of life. And by doing so, I can be a better mother to my son, because instead of delegating that final soothing, to my mother, the self-soothing now has to come from me, right? No,
mm.
nobody's going to come to my crib and, take care of me. So,
Right.
um, but in doing so, um, again, I think that I don't know, I'm a better parent. I'm a better parent to my son in that I'm in the moments. I'm in the moments because it's just me, you know. And I think that as we get older, that's going to happen. So, you know, if the cycle of life goes as people hope it goes, which is the older, you know, the parents go first before the children, and you know that's a privilege too, to have your parent go and not have them have to see you go.
Sure.
But your friends pass, and you know life changes so dramatically, and I think for you know it can be a scary time, you know, for our lives to be in this state, and will only continue to be in this state as we get older. But at the same time, there is a comfort, and I don't know, it's hot. I don't know. I've always been fascinated by death, so and my friends make fun of me for it, so because I find it comforting. I don't find it scary, and
Hmm.
I find it going back to getting back to nature and getting back to connection and getting. I think there's a connection to those who have passed that there's not a disconnect. You can't you don't see them anymore. You can't talk to them. You can't hear them, but I think there's a connection. And so I think as women, as we get older, I don't know, I think this whole, you know, almost environmental feel of we're all one, we're all connected, to me has just intensified rather than been deconstructed, if that makes sense.
Melissa, do you feel you are more connected with your mother? Do you feel like you search for that connection?
I feel as connect we were very close, so I feel as connected. I feel more
Mm.
connected to my father, who I didn't have a big connection with. I think that I think
That's
yes.
fascinating.
I do. I feel
Mhm.
there's a warmth. It's like a warmth around me all the time. And so I can go to that. Even though I can't call them, it's hard to not be able to have the conversation, to hear the voices, and to, you know, get the hard advice, or to, you know, for me sometimes, and people know this, I overthink things. I over analyze things, and for them to snap me out of it, you know. But still there's a reflection on them that's very, it's a positive thing. It's not never been a negative thing for me. It's been hard. I mean, it's a the leading up to their departures is the biggest gauntlet. Not after, once they depart, it's, to me, that's not the hard part. It's before.
Interesting
Allison,
perspective. Yeah.
was that similar for you with your experience with your mom?
Yeah, I feel her so much. I wish like I want her to haunt me, but she does like I don't see butterflies, you know what I mean? Like I'm waiting to see like a garbage pail full of pennies or something so I know she's there. I don't feel that. It feels more like a calm in my solar plexus. Like I feel like she is so much better and so much more complete and whole, and she kind of resides right here. And that I don't feel alone despite all that stuff I just said about feeling lonely like and feeling hurt all the time. I don't feel alone. I feel like she's with me. And I you know, my mother suffered for like 10 years with chronic issues, you know. And so when she passed, and because it was so beautiful, because we were all there, you know, I'm one of 7 kids, and my mom and dad had 6. So we had 5 of us in the room with her and the other one on the phone. Um, and it just was beautiful. And that, you know, um, I felt like in that room when she was transitioning, when she was passing, it felt like I felt the power of our family. I felt it like viscerally. I felt, I'm getting chills now thinking about it. I felt this power and this connection that we were going to be okay, that we were so strong because we had each other, and because it started from this woman, you know, who loved us so much and so powerfully. And that it just, I'm very grateful of how she went. I know that sounds
Mhm.
weird. Maybe Melissa, you
No.
and I can start a death club because I'm into it too.
Look, look, well, and it is a club.
That's the next
Yeah,
podcast
I
series,
know, the death club. I
Death and
know.
Dying series.
Death
I
and
know.
dying. Oh God.
I know it, but I love the topic. But yeah,
It's
there's definitely
fascinating.
a club of people who've
Whew.
lost their moms for sure, especially if
Y'all are
you're close
both
with
making
them.
me tear
I
up.
know.
I'm like, "Oh, I'm
We
gonna
need
go
to talk
call my
about
mom
roller
right
coasters
now."
No,
and
but
puppies.
But
rainbows.
I know. But the thing is too, though, I
Gotta go
think
call her.
I know,
You're
right?
so sweet, Jen.
But the thing is too, like you just mentioned about the power of family from this one person.
Oh,
And for
the
those who are listening
legacy.
who don't have children, again, I'm a proponent. So not all women need to have children. And if you don't have
Sure.
children, you shouldn't feel bad about it. But it's just going back to your culture changers. I mean, it's all to me the same topic where you know you make an impact on the world, right? Your life matters. You're here for a reason. Like we've all again done the fertility clinic thing, and that the biggest thing in getting my son here was learning that we are all we're not the norm. Most IVF, if you notice, it doesn't work. It took us
Yeah.
3 cycles to get our son here. And some who never get their child here, even going through various cycles. And so that shows you how in nature there's so many times that there was almost pregnancy, or you had pregnancy and you miscarried and never knew it because it was so early in. We are the exception to the rule. The people who are actually living, made it through all kinds of odds. And so I believe we're here for a reason, and maybe it's not just one, but you definitely make an impact. You have a ripple effect just by being alive. And I think that us talking about our mothers, whatever it is you do, and the fact that you were doing this, you're changing the culture of different things. You're making an impact in those ways. Like, and I just wish that women understood that we're not just, when we're here to serve others, it makes us the sun, right? It makes us the source. It makes us powerful, not weaker because of it. And I feel like for some women, they feel like they've sacrificed too much in order to do for others.
But how much do you think that women, from a societal perspective, have been diminished in a way where I'll take for an example only because it's popping up in my head is that I have friends that are stay-at-home moms that dread the question, "Oh, do you work? Oh, do you work outside the home? Do you do anything besides raising these humans?" You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And there's such a devaluing that I feel like there are so many micro infractions that we as women may hear our whole lives that we don't know that our voice is as powerful as it can be, or our thoughts and the things that we want to help and change. And that was kind of the catalyst. I mean, I never cared about any of this stuff before I turned 40, like I see people who are teenagers and they're talking about changing the world. And I was like, when I was just trying to get a boy to like me, like I was just watching MTV, and it's so different now. I just think everything is changing that I wonder. I mean, Jen, you're a mom of 2 girls. Do you think that those girls, and even Melissa, you having a boy that is treating a girl a certain way. I think post Me Too, I wonder if our girls, our little girls, and the girls that your children influence are going to be so different or have a much different experience, hopefully a better experience, a more empowered one than we had growing up.
And it's all because of us and our generation leading the way. And it's because of our mother's generation leading the way for us. Because if you can see it, you can be it. If we're going to set up different parameters than what were set up for us. And so I absolutely agree with you. I think they're going to be different. Little story of a friend of mine who is an ER doctor. Okay. So she takes care of patients in the ER. She is, their last name is Miles. She is Dr. Miles and her husband is Mr. Miles. Okay. So Dr. and Mr.
Don't get it
are
twisted.
right, are great friends of ours, and we're all raising kids together. And she said she took her daughter to work. They had like a take your daughter to work day. So she took her into the ER, and then they were in the locker room, where the doctors keep their things. And then they went into surgery and she showed her that. And then she went into this and showed her that and had introduced her to all of her doctor friends. And her daughter at the end of that said, "Mom, can boys be doctors?"
Love it.
Because everybody she met that day was a woman and was a doctor. So are we changing the narrative for the next generation? Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and we still have challenges though, because you still have people who are traditionalists and not realizing that they're doing this. So my son, from the beginning, his other mother and I, it was no blue at the baby shower. We don't, we're not the pink and blue and all this stuff. We every time he talks about God, I always say he or she, because he, try to let him know that God is not necessarily this big dude that's passing judgment over everybody. When he loves
With the white beard in the sky.
Yes, just sitting at a
Right.
desk watching us. The gamers, he's a big gamer. And so all that he sees are boy gamers. But I always say, well, there's girl gamers too. And I play video games with him and I try. So I'm always trying to interject in his mind the fact that girls do it too. Girls do it too. So we were talking about, the colors one time, and pink came up and he said, is that a girl's color? And I said, anybody can do pink and anybody can do blue and all this stuff. Anyway, he comes home from school the other day and something pink came up and he said, well, I can't have that because it's pink. Now that's not my influence. That's somebody else's influence.
Yeah,
He heard the guys at school say that because somebody's dad or mom had said that and just perpetuated this whole thing. And I had to correct him again. And I've even put my foot down and to tell him, basically, you have two mothers. I don't want you ever coming in here and telling me a girl can't do something or is not a part of something. And that will be it, and I'm like, but that goes the other way too. Boys can do anything a girl can do as well. So I try to not make him the victim, or the bad guy. It's balanced. But I know that already at 7 years old,
he's
learned. There's something, if it's a girl thing, I can't be a part of it. And it's like, here we go again. It's like Jenn said, those of us in our home have a huge influence. How we discuss stories on television, how we discuss sitcoms and what we see in sitcoms, the little jokes you make are so impactful to your child that just be careful about what you're saying, because does it sound sexist? Then don't teach your children to be sexist that way.
My husband has been, I'm not proud of this, but my husband has been showing my kids South Park because they think I'm Beavis and Butthead.
I love South Park.
Hilarious.
And my daughter's like, Daddy, what are sluts?
Oh no.
Oh,
no.
It's like, great in our house.
Opening up some conversations you weren't prepared for. Oh
well,
my gosh.
I will say my daughter asked me, they said, Mommy, what does pussy mean? And I was like, so my husband and I were like they were dodging our kids, like, and we ran away. And I was like, no. You come back here. I'm going to tell you.
Good.
So I got both my kids and I was like, here's what it means. It's a horrible word, and here are the implications. And they're like, oh, and like we thought about it and we're like, we can't, like, I would rather them hear it from me than hear it from their friends and have it be vilified in some way, like that. If I have to be there for those conversations if they present itself and not just giggle and run away. I didn't know how to handle the sluts one. I think my husband,
my God.
I don't know how to handle that one.
Good for you, though.
It comes at you quick. Wow.
But good for you for having that conversation. Like you said, so many parents would not want to have anything to do with that. Like it's hard for me to get my son's grandmother to say penis, because I tell her it's okay to say penis because she doesn't know what to call that. And I'm like, well, you call that a penis. It's not that. But also I have been given the responsibility of giving the talk. His other mother doesn't want to give the talk. Our donor, our sperm donor, he was somebody who was a friend of ours, who he was given the responsibility. But when he gave the talk to his own children and their friends, he included in the conversation about whether it was all boys, whether they slept with girls or boys. Like he made sure in case one of those guys was gay, that he felt included in the conversation. And that's something nobody thinks to tell their children about, especially if you're straight parents. You never think twice about talking about the birds and the bees, but some of your kids are bees and birds and birds. And so that should be a part of the conversation. Even if it doesn't apply to your child, they will accept friends who are gay if you say in the conversation to them, look, whether you choose to sleep with a guy or a girl, you should use condoms. You should do this. You should do, and just let it just be part of it. Don't make a big deal out of it. It's just whoever you choose to sleep with, so that they know they have a choice, right? In the way that they feel. And it's okay. So anyway, I just think that we have to really, if we're going to make that change, that we have to do differently. Different results come from different actions. And if we don't want the same old thing, same old prejudice, same feeling of exclusion, then you have to bring it upon yourself to have those conversations in the home. And I commend you for that. Good for you. I know that took a lot of bravery,
Well,
but you did
but
it.
but I also live. So I live in Old Fourth Ward. So I live in. If you're listening, it's a really cool part of Atlanta, and it's a very very mixed neighborhood. So we have gay, straight, mixed couples, mixed race. I mean, you see all of it everywhere, and so everything is normal. I've been wondering, when you think about prejudices, how do you change it in an area where everybody looks like you, in a homogenous area? So if it's the suburbs, the exurbs, the rural areas, and I don't know the answer to that. The only thing I can think of is media. Like, the more if you look in commercials now, they have so many more mixed race couples, or they, like Target has cards that are like for mom and mom, and they have more inclusive cards, but it's not enough. And so I don't know if you've ever given that thought, but I wonder, because for me, it's just where we live, so it's easy to have those conversations. We have a next door neighbor that is a gay couple. They have 3 kids, and they're 2 dads, and it was an easy conversation. There weren't any questions or like, really? What? There's no mom? It was just,
Right.
oh, okay.
Cool.
Just because that's what we're around. So I don't know if there's an answer to that.
I mean, I think it's about how you model it in your life with your friendships and in your reactions to things. And I do think, as someone who was a city gal who has now moved to the suburbs across America are a lot more diverse than I think they're given credit for. So, Melissa, you're in a burb that is very diverse. I am in a burb that is very diverse. So, at least where we are in the country, I feel like even the suburbs are very blended, whether that comes to a sexuality, sexual orientation, or race, or anything. And so I think no matter where you live, you'll be presented with the opportunity to have those conversations. And I think it's about how you handle them
I
in the
agree.
moment.
But I also think media is important. I do think it can be enough, because I reflect on the fact that I grew up in I grew up in the burbs of a very small town, and everybody looked the same. But my parents laughed as loudly to Sanford and Son and Good Times as they did to any other white sitcom. And I know that sounds crazy that would have an influence, but it did, because my parents weren't racist, and their lives, it's hard to explain, but it was on hindsight that I look back, and we had so much potential to be racist. We had so much potential to be small-minded people, because we lived in a small town. They came from a small town. Like, we fit the stereotype, but my parents were not that way, and their parents were not that way. And so they raised us to not be that way. And so I think that, um, for me, watching media, watching their reaction, hearing their conversations, was very impactful for me, because I found them to be very intelligent people. So I wanted to hear what they had to say about everything. And it was all about, just, if you do the work and you're fair to others and you earn your keep, then that makes you a good person. And I don't know, it's hard to explain, but to me, media was the diversity I got for a long time. Now, in my school
That's cool.
system, I had a lot of, I had diverse friends, but those initial lessons came from them simply watching television. And it was really educational to see them have equal entertainment. Didn't matter if you're funny, you're funny. Doesn't matter who you are.
Y'all are both very introspective. I love how thoughtful you are.
Are you kidding me? You are the most introspective guest that we have ever had.
Oh my God.
So for our
Probably this chick
Friendzy-
she's really deep.
I love it. I'm like, can we just like take this to a wine night, ladies? Like, can we just go right on over to the restaurant together and keep this going?
I know,
love
right?
that. But if
We
y'all
could
want to
solve
find
some
out,
problems. We could
Yeah, we
solve some
could.
problems
Absolutely.
together.
If you want to learn more about Allison, it's Allison Hare, HARE.com. And you can follow her on Instagram as well at Allison, ALLISON _. Got it. Hare, HARE. Now, Allison, we're not quite finished yet.
You talk about introspection. We got
Ready?
we got more
some
introspection.
Oh man.
rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, I'm
First
ready.
thing that comes to your mind, we ask all of our guests the Friendzy 5.
Okay.
Number 1, where is your cozy, happy place?
My bed.
Do you have a really good comforter, like a down one that gets you all
No, it's
snuggled
like
in?
crappy. It's crap. Like my husband and I bitch about it all the time, but there's something about like when you put your pajamas on at night and like you take off your makeup and you're like, and just getting in the bed when everything is done feels like a productive day.
Number 2, what's your favorite framed thing in your home?
A picture of my husband and I in Krog Street Tunnel.
Oh,
Cute. Number 3, what's your most memorable birthday?
This last one, because it was beautiful.
Oh, so cool. Can you give us a little tidbit on what happened?
Well, I think it's because the year before was awful. And so I was so afraid of it. I had torn my ACL. I just was on like an 8-hour work meeting that I hated the job too. It was just awful. So this one was just so thoughtful. And, like my kids, my husband took my kids to make tea mugs. Like I drink tea. And so they made some mugs for me. It was just so thoughtful and beautiful. Yeah, it was nice.
Number 4, what's a daily routine or ritual you stick to?
I write in a journal every morning.
Awesome.
Every morning.
And number 5, what fashion trend did you jump on?
any era.
Crimped hair. I'm from New Jersey.
The crimper.
I have crimped hair.
Remember the crimper.
We talked about hot rollers, but I forgot about the crimper. You're
Oh
right.
yeah. It's just disgusting.
Fantastic. Allison, I'm so excited to connect with you, and I hope you'll come back and join us again.
It was a pleasure anytime. Thank you so much for having me.